Welcome to another neXup podcast. Here we are again, here to talk tech and kind of break it down. So for today's show, we got some quick tech news, and then I will continue on with part 2 of my nexus-pixel history rundown, as well as my big topic. Do we really want American smartphones? So before I get started, let me go ahead and run down the intro real quick. So I am your host, PC747. I am someone who, when I first got into smartphones, I really didn't have a clue what I was doing. And, I spoke about a number of occasions how my brother at the time was pretty much the tech guy. And me, I was the guy, who always had to go to little brother to help me out with my tech. And then eventually I picked up the Motorola Droid. I learned how to root. I learned how to write about it. And everything just kind of changed. I started teaching people how to use it. Started helping people troubleshoot their problems. And things have flipped. Now I'm the go-to for the tech guy. And, well, my brother has surpassed me when it comes to sport talk. I mean, he's pretty much the guy. Every time we have anything, any type of sports debate, I pretty much just give up when I talk to him. But when it comes to tech, it's like, I kind of know what I'm talking about when it comes to this. Now, I know a lot of people out there who are trying to get into it. They have even said that, man, I really do not have a clue what's going on. I really would like someone to kind of break this down in a way that I can understand it. And that's pretty much what I try to do. I try to take a lot of the stuff I talk about tech and break it down so that, the average everyday person can pick it up and feel like they are a part of it. And that's the goal. So this is the neXup podcast. And basically, I'm bringing sensible tech to sensible people. Now, you can hear this podcast every Friday on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and my website, neXup.com. If you have any questions or topics you would like me to cover, please feel free to hit me up at PC747 at neXup.net. Now let's go ahead and get started. And we got to kick it off talking about, Prime Week. So according to Yahoo Finances, Prime Week was pretty successful. So a big one for the e-commerce giant Amazon, as they outsold last year's projected sales by over 100 million more items. Amazon states that they exceeded their Black Friday sales and Cyber Monday sales combined this year. So this was a very successful week for Amazon, the e-commerce giant. I'm pretty sure right now, they are popping bottles. They are celebrating in the amount of money they brought in. And, it proves yet again that, as far as, people are concerned, Amazon is doing a pretty good job. Now, for me, as far as what I purchased, I picked up a robot vacuum cleaner. Why? Honestly, I saw the word deal in front of it. It's something that looked like I might want to check it out. I'm a tech guy. So, that's why I picked it up. And to be honest with you, it was something I didn't really need, and it could have been left right there at wherever I got it from. But I picked it up, played around with it today, and so far, I'm kind of liking it. But I'm curious, what did you buy during Prime Week this week? Did you make an impulse buy? Was you planning for the buy? Or were you just someone who just I kept my money in my pocket? But let's go ahead and continue on with the topics going on in tech. Let's go ahead and go to some Apple news real quick. So if you're a fan of the iPhone 11, I am pretty sure you heard that, what's about to come up with the next iPhone. So for the iPhone 11, iPhone 11 Max, and the iPhone 11R, you guys know you're going to get this 3-camera setup. On the iPhone 11 and iPhone 11 Max, that will have 3 cameras on the back, but for the iPhone 11R, it's going to have 2 cameras. Now, both 9to5 Mac and Marques Brownlee showed off mock-ups of, these iPhones on their channel. So fans, if you or someone kind of want to know what to expect when you get this new iPhone, check out their channel, because they really get up to close and personal with what this iPhone will look like, how it will look in the cases, and what you expect to see this fall. Now, I remember being very critical of Google for the Pixel 4 XL, saying that I really felt like they just pretty much ripped off the iPhone 11. But now after taking a closer look at some of these mock-ups, yeah, I gotta stand down on what I just said. Yeah, they look kind of similar, but really, you could tell the difference. I don't think anyone's going to confuse them at all. The reality, first of all, is Huawei beat them both to getting this look onto their phones. Even though Google and Apple is putting their glass covering for the cameras right there towards the top left, whereas Huawei put it more towards the center of the back of their phone. When you look at the iPhone 11 and you put it next to the Pixel 4 XL, you can clearly see a difference where Google's look more like a robot look, almost like a face, versus Apple's kind of looking like more like an arrow or a triangle type look, on a 11 and 11 Max, and really 11R as well. So, yeah, I look forward to kind of seeing this phone coming out in the fall, and I think they're going to see a surge of customers looking to pick this thing up because it's a new iPhone. And anytime Apple put out some new look of a product, there are going to be a number of iPhone fans or Apple fans wanting to pick it up, because they are dying to see a new look iPhone. This fall, look forward to iPhone 11, iPhone 11 Max, and iPhone 11R debuting with iOS 13. So let's go ahead and some future hardware news of what we expect to come up. So Qualcomm reveals their upcoming processor, the Snapdragon 855 Plus. Basically, it's just an overclock, or for those who understand overclock, sped up 855 processor. The processor that's currently running in most flagship phones right now. Now, this processor is mainly designed for the 5G wave of phones that are pretty much coming out this year, at the end of this year, and mainly towards 2020. Now, we're not going to see a lot of phones this year having the 855 Plus, but there are some manufacturers that came out and said, yeah, we will have the 855 Plus in our phones. Black Shark was one of them, Lenovo, Realme, Vivo will have it in their next phone, Nubia's Red Magic 3 will have it, and the Black Shark. Now, note that many of these phones, or a couple of these phones, are gaming phones, and that makes sense because we're kind of starting to see this trend of basically gaming phones wanting to have the processing power that they need to be able to handle these high-powered games and be able to handle all that. Now, for those of you who kind of like, all right, gaming phones, yeah, pretty much there was a trend started about a couple of years back. It really started with the Razer phone, basically the big gaming computer company, where they made a phone that was pretty much a phone that was spec'd up. It had a lot of specs around it. It was heavy on the processing power and the ability to be able to handle, hardcore gaming. Now, the flip side of it was the camera quality wasn't as good compared to some of the other phones out there. But it really did, provide those who wanted that hardcore gaming experience a way to get that. And it provided a way to kind of give, more processing power at a cheaper price. Because like I said, the way they got around that was they may have boosted up the processing power, but they kind of scaled back on maybe the display tech or the camera quality to kind of make up for that. So those that were picking up gaming phones knew they was getting it for gaming. They wasn't really looking for it for camera quality or anything like that. Now, another hardware manufacturer looking to put out some new hardware in 2020, Samsung, will be making their 12 gigabyte RAM chips available for other phone makers. So hopefully this will mean that in the coming year, especially in 2020 and above, we start seeing 12 gigabytes become the new norm for smartphone RAM. And here's looking at you, Google. You need to step it up and maybe look at something like this. HTC. So pretty much HTC, for those of you who have a soft spot for this company and you have that moment where you like, man, I remember HTC, that moment of reminiscence of the company that was, well, they're going to have a couple of Wildfire phones. And we saw it make its appearance, or some pictures or images make its appearance on a couple of sites, the Wildfire 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, if you look at the specs of these phones, they're not appealing at all. In fact, when I look at these things, I'm like, man, these are more like mid to low specs. This is not going to be something that people are going to look at this phone and like, I need to go out there and get it. It's not going to be appealing at all, especially when you got companies like OnePlus, Red Magic up there, Nubia, Black Shark. There are a number of these smaller companies that are coming out here and making phones with specs that are going to be much better than what HTC is putting out there. So I can't really see anybody looking at this thing and saying, wow, I really want to pick this thing up. Matter of fact, I have a hard time figuring out how they're going to sell that at all. And really, when I think about this, as far as HTC, I know it's going to sound cruel, but someone really needs to put them out their misery. They have died a long time ago, and I don't even know why they're still around. There's no one who really care about the company. At this point, they're dead. There's no way they're looking to compete. I don't think they have the people to really compete. The last time we really saw a big appearance from these guys was in Google's Pixel phones, but other than that, there's really nothing that really stood out for this company. I mean, this is the same company that is known for the Tilt, the Hero, the Evo, the Nexus One, Desire, the Resound. So many HTC phones in the past that really shaped where we are as far as technology, quietly brilliant. Well, they're not there, and honestly, a lot of people moved on from them. They're one of those companies like Motorola. At the end of the day, Android fans like myself, we will always feel like those are the companies that, helped started this movement of where we're at with Google and Android, and we will always have a soft spot for them. But now, they're gone. Motorola, for the most part, they're not Motorola. They're Lenovo. They're dead. They're a shell of themselves. And HTC, they're about the same. And honestly, as much as I would like to see those two companies make a comeback, the reality is it's not going to happen. And, I don't think a lot of people are really missing HTC or saying, where's HTC? I would love to see them come back. I think right now with a lot of other companies who are stepping up and more choices to choose from, basically it's get to the point where people are going to just forget about HTC. And they're going to become one of those things that the only time we bring them up is for a trivia question. Now, let's talk about part 2 of my nexus-pixel series. So, in part 2, Google continues to kind of pick up their stride with the Nexus 5. Having, kind of seen how the Nexus 4 didn't quite get the same appeal they was looking for. It was kind of picking back up, but it was more of one of the things where, all right, the Galaxy Nexus, it failed at being an LTE phone. You were trying to, pick the pieces back up. You got the Nexus 4 out there, but it was at a time where Galaxy Note was just dominating with the Note 2. Samsung wasn't, just starting to pick up and really take the reins at becoming the go-to smartphone manufacturer. At this time, it's like, all right, man, Google really needed to find some way to get back in this thing. And who they turned to? Well, they turned right back to LG. And you know what? That ended up being a good thing overall. Now, when they first came out, they did have some quality control issues with their speaker. But once they got this thing fixed, I have to say the LG Nexus 5 was a pretty good phone. Overall, the size was just, I would say, almost right where it needed to be. It wasn't too big, wasn't too small, it was light. Yeah, it was kind of plasticky, and some people may have felt, well, okay, I would like to see it be more premium building or have a more premium feel to it. But yeah, I had a blast with the Nexus 5, and in a way, I wanted to see a refreshed version of the Nexus 5, but done right. More, if I could see the Nexus 5 done where it's all glass and, have the specs that are up to date with modern specs now, similar to what we have with the OnePlus, I think I can really, well, OnePlus 7 Pro, I could really jump on board that. But yeah, that really led us down to the next phone, the Nexus 6. Google finally decided to say, okay, they heard the complaints of people. People want a more premium Nexus. They want a larger Nexus. You're seeing the Note series out there, dominating. People want larger phones. They saying, Google, it's time for you to give us a larger phone. And, oh, by the way, we would like to be able to buy this phone at our carrier store. So they gave people everything they wanted. So you would think the phone that everyone has finally asked for with all the wishes they would want, this should be the best and most dominating phone ever, right? Well, it kind of had a little issues. First of all, when they gave it to the stores to sell, they didn't quite have the same, standard like Apple does with their phones. When Apple give a carrier or allow a carrier to sell their phones, they pretty much tell them, do not touch our phone. You're not going to put your branding on it. You're not going to put your apps on it. You're going to sell this phone as is. Either that, or we'll take our phone somewhere else. And when it comes to to the carriers, yeah, they are willing to go or follow what Apple suggests. And they're not going to, quote, anger Apple to the point where they're going to say, nah, we're going to let you go somewhere else, because they know how popular their brand is. Android or Google, when it comes to the Nexus products, they have been willing to cave to the manufacturers, or I'm sorry, to the carriers. And yeah, and that was the case with the Nexus 6. We did see a little branding on there, especially with AT&T putting their little stamp on it. They kind of locked it down where they SIM locked it, as well as adding their own little ringtones and stuff. So there are a lot of fans who were like, look, this is a Nexus phone. This is supposed to be the one phone that's supposed to be pure. This is the one phone we go to for Google to give us a pure Google experience without any carrier branding, without any carrier interference. Only thing we wanted the carriers to do was sell the phone as is. And Google did not hold the carriers to that standard. And yeah, it was a letdown for people. You also had some people complain about the size being just a little bit too big. Shamu, it actually lived up to that, just being a little bit too wide for some people. But overall, for me, if you would ask me, did the Nexus 6 live up to the hype? All of those people back in the day when you had a Motorola Droid and the Nexus 1, and you were like, man, if I can have the Motorola Droid, but with the Nexus 1 software with Google's on it, I would like to see those combined, especially in the era where it was a new Motorola owned by Google. Could we finally see the Motorola Nexus that we all dreamed of? And for me, I felt like it did live up to the hype. Yes, it had some issues. Like I said, I would have liked to see less carrier interference. But even with the carrier interference, a lot of us knew how to get around that. The little carrier branding that AT&T put on there, we was able to clean that off with a toothbrush. As far as being locked down, you was able to pay for the phone outright and get it unlocked or get it SIM unlocked, so that you can use it on any carrier. In fact, that was what I did with my Nexus 6, and I tested going to different carriers, including Verizon, and was able to put their SIM card in it and use it just fine. So for me, the phone lived up to the hype, and yeah, like the Nexus 5, it's the one phone, Nexus phone that I still own. So as far as the Nexus 5 and Nexus 6, I consider those two to be, as far as the second half of the, or part 2 of my Nexus-Pixel history, to be the successful phones. But we got to conclude the Nexus line with the 5X and 6P. Now, I talked about how the Nexus 5 was a very popular phone for a lot of fans. And yeah, with the Nexus 6, some people was kind of complaining that, even though you gave us a Nexus 6 phone that was a Nexus or more premium Nexus, we want a Nexus to kind of be cheap. That was kind of our appeal to the Nexus. You had some people that said, I go to a Nexus because I want a similar to flagship-like phone, but cheaper than what the other flagship carriers or manufacturers are putting out there. And so Google had to decided to appeal to both fans. So the Nexus 5X was more geared towards those who were wanting a cheaper phone, and they gave it to them. While the Nexus 6P was geared for those who wanted the premium phone. Now, overall, I would say that software-wise, Google did a good job with the experience. When the phone first came out, I think even though you had some complaints about the build quality of both phones and, understood, especially 6P being able to be bent pretty easily, overall, I think a lot of people would say that, they enjoyed it for the most part, until we got to the point where we started having issues with boot looping issues and barrier issues, and then you had to deal with the manufacturers and Google to handle this. This ended up in Google paying over $17 million in class action lawsuits. So if you were to look at where these phones stand, where I may think these would be a successful line, the reality is you can question whether or not they were really actually successful, because yeah, it's kind of hard to say you're a success if you're actually costing your company money. And for me personally, even though I do regard the Pixel 6P to be what I think is a really good device, I actually had a problem with having to go through Google when I had to repair mine, because yeah, I actually did have some issues with the phone having the same barrier issue that people complain about. And I did go through Google to repair it. And, well, not Google, but I went to Google and went through Google's tech support. At the end of the day, they ended up sending me to Huawei to get a repair. And I've actually said that, man, if Google, or I would never want to ever deal with Huawei ever again. As far as the support they provided and just overall, I didn't care too much for it. And, the phone I got back, I didn't feel like it really solved the problem. So yeah, at the end of the day, when I look at the Pixel line of products, especially, I say part two or the last half of the Pixels, overall, I give Google credit for this. They really did improve the software. I can see where they were going with the hardware, trying to match the hardware and the software to give a combined experience that was better than, I would say, some of the premium phones out there. And in fact, I speak on a number of occasions about how I willingly gave up my Note 5, which had the better hardware, because I didn't care too much for the software experience on it. And I traded in, or not really traded in, I gave it to someone and bought a Nexus 6P. And I ended up holding this Nexus 6P for 2 years. Probably the longest I ever held a phone, in the modern smartphone era. Because of the simple fact that software-wise, it was a smooth experience. It did what it's supposed to do. And despite it going down with the class action lawsuits, yeah, it did its job. And I think the Nexus 6P, out of all the phones, was a phone that actually did a good job as far as being able to go the distance, at least for me, But yeah, that's kind of where we are at with the Nexus Pixel history as we conclude the Nexus part of the series, and we will continue on next week talking about what a Pixel line of phones. But let's talk about my topic for today. And, what kind of sparked this for me was, over the past month as, we started digging into, Huawei and issues going on with them. And, we kind of talked about a lot of the things going on in the background with, the trade war. And I, try to be kind of careful with that because I don't want to get political, and I still don't ever want to get political with any of my podcasts. And this may be another one that kind of, walks that line of being what some may be considered political, but it's not that, And the topic is, do we really want to see American-made smartphones? And for me, I'm all for supporting local businesses, for a number of reasons. One, well, I'm providing a business to my neighbor. And to me, that's a good thing, because if I'm putting money in my neighbor's pocket, they in turn will eventually be able to take that and reinvest it back in my pocket. And we'll basically be able to support each other and support more and more and more people in our community and see that community grow. As well as this, if I have a relationship with the neighbor or the person I bought something from, I'm hoping that equates to, well, as far as the overall business relationship, it being better than, one I may have with someone I don't know. Why? Because, well, with my neighbor, I'm thinking that they're not going to want to hear the whispers of people saying that, yeah, that person cheats them or cheats us. This person known for, being dishonest. So because they're not going to want that, they're more likely to be upfront, more helpful, more willing to work with you. And when you have that relationship with someone you see pretty much every day, that means that the product that you're getting had the potential to be better than anywhere else you're going to get it from, because of the simple fact that the person that's selling that product to you, and the person selling the product to you understands that, yeah, you're just someone like him that's just trying to make a living, trying to, provide for the family, and you want to make sure whatever you buy, it lasts and it does what it's supposed to do. Now, let's be honest when we talk about companies and businesses and all that. Now, before I kind of continue on with that, I want to state this plain and clear. This is not a debate against or for labor unions. I can make arguments on both sides of it. I've seen areas where unions may have hurt businesses, but I've also seen areas where unions have come in and really done a great job for, providing protection for employees. Being able to help them deal with the situation, like providing fair wages. If anyone going to sit there and argue and say that a business, do not look after the business or number one for themselves and never cheated a person, we know that's not the case. And that had been where at times unions have come in and been a big help. But there have been times when unions have hurt businesses. So we've seen both sides of that. But this is not going to be one to debate one way or another. It's just, we got to be frank when we talk about an American business, or let's be honest, a American smartphone manufacturer, and how that will be able to work. Well, because let's be honest, when we look at what we want out of a job, we want a fair wage that will allow me to support my families, provide the needs that we need as far as medical and dental insurance, as well as have maybe a few extra dollars in our pocket to be able to buy a few toys. At the end of the day, most people, as far as Americans want to be, we just want to be comfortable. And if we'll be honest, a lot of us, especially in this generation, we're not really feeling that real back-breaking work mentality or idea. Going out there and digging ditches and really coming in with the sore back and all that. Some will argue that the modern day Americans do not really have the heart for that like the Americans in the past. And if we really look back at what Motorola tried to do 5 years ago, trying to bring a business to Texas, it was a feel-good story. It sounded good. But really, we as Americans didn't support it. Now, it can be easily argued that, well, it wasn't that we wasn't trying to support it. It just, the advice they gave us didn't match what the, market was selling. They gave us a phone, the Motorola X, a dual-core phone, when you had quad-core phones out there. I made that argument. I said, as much as this, I look forward to an American-made Motorola. When it was made available, I liked the idea that I could fully customize it. There's a lot of things about that phone I really love, but the one thing I couldn't get it behind: how in the world were you selling a dual-core phone when quad-core was the incident? Now, I actually didn't have this in my notes, but this is something I'm kind of just came to my thought process now. Looking at then, because Motorola was just bought out by Google at the time. When they was having this going on, they were kind of selling this. And you look at the phones now and the complaints I have with the Pixels now, my do these parallel each other? Because you look at the Pixel phones now, and my biggest complaint is that Google constantly put out phones that does not match up what the market is asking for. And here you are, you're looking at the Motorola, an American-made phone, that the reason why it didn't sell because the market was asking for a quad-core, and you had Motorola putting out dual-core phones. And even though they try to say, hey, listen, man, you're missing the fact that, our dual-core phones are able to perform up to the same standard as a quad-core phone, people wasn't hearing that. When it came to specs, you had dual-core, and more manufacturers had quad-core. Why would I spend money on your phone that you're charging at the same price as those guys over there when all you had to do was give us at least quad-core? So at the end of the day, that phone bombed. In fact, we didn't see this phone really become successful until the price dropped. Now, once the price dropped right around that Black Friday deal, man, Motorola's website was crashing because they couldn't handle the demand. People were just storming the website trying to get the phone. And it really proved the fact that when it comes to selling a flagship phone, well, Motorola didn't feel like they could do that. In fact, that was the last time we saw Motorola as the Motorola we know. Eventually, that led to Google pretty much, stripping Motorola of the rights and properties they needed to protect themselves against all these frivolous lawsuits coming from Apple and all these other companies. And then they pretty much sold off the rest of it to Lenovo to pretty much go from there. Now, this is where I'm asking the question: will we ever be able to see an American company put out a smartphone that we're going to support? Because when you look at what we deal with here as far as American companies and what they don't have to deal with overseas. And if you take like companies like OnePlus, who's in China or in other countries, well, let's be honest, when you look at the cost of smartphones right now and how we as customers are starting to complain that we're starting to see these $1,200, $1,500 smartphones, and we're like, you guys need to kind of calm down with this. And, OnePlus right now being appealing. Why? Because they're able to pretty much match the same specs that Samsung was matching for almost half the price. But you look at well, let's be honest, China's labor practices are not the same as here in the United States. When you look at American tech companies, right now they're centered around Silicon Valley. Well, the cost of living in San Francisco is crazy. I was there last year, and I left there saying, man, I don't know how the world they do it over there, How is it that you can make six figures over there and you could be considered in poverty, where the dream of American or owning a home is like within reach here in the rest of the states. Right there in San Francisco, the dream is to own an apartment, where there are a lot of people who are working 9 to 5 jobs, and making wages that would be more than enough to not only buy a house out here or in other parts of the country, but be able to have a decent living. Over there, that's not enough to be able to afford an apartment. There are a lot of people living out of their cars, and it's normal. So, as they say, there's a lot of middle-class poor people over there, or a lot of middle-class homeless people over there. And when you look at what it costs to, provide the talent in Silicon Valley, the cost for, really providing a decent wage there. Of course, when it comes to a company like Google and Apple, that in order for them to support the people that are going to work there and to keep the talent there, well, it's going to cost them money, and they're having to pass those costs on to you. And that brings me to the question of how could we make an American company work here in the States where it can compete with Apple, with iPhone, it can compete with Samsung, with the Note, it can give us a better phone than what the Google can with the Pixel, and give us something similar to kind of the specs what OnePlus is able to do, but at a price point where people can afford it. And when I look back and kind of, brainstorm in a way that maybe you could maybe guide this into working, well, first thing first, location is going to be the big thing. You cannot have a factory or a location in a city like LA or San Francisco or New York. Cost of living is too high. And if the people that are working there can barely afford to live, they're going to demand more wages. And if they're demanding more wages, well, the manufacturer is going to charge more money for you to be able to own a device. So location is going to be a big thing. So a place like Nashville, Atlanta, Texas, pretty much somewhere else other than those big cities that the cost of living is pretty high. The other thing is what talent? Where are you going to get the talent? Are you going to be able to, acquire the talent from, the local neighborhoods to assemble these phones, and are you going to be able to do so at a price that makes sense? Because if we look back at Motorola, they probably did the same thing, right? They was in Texas. But when you look at the local talent, well, for every phone, you got to look at how much it's going to cost to build that phone, which means for the American wages, you're looking at $15 an hour or more, and a lot of people, they're going to want a little bit more than that $15 an hour range, especially if you're closer to the cities. On top of that, health benefits, sick pay, time that you lose for sick wages, or for people not being at work. All of that is going to be added on to the cost of the phone. And then you ask the question, how much will that phone cost? And if you take that phone, what it will cost, will it be able to give us a flagship phone that is equivalent to that of a Samsung, of a OnePlus, or some of these higher spec phones at a price that makes sense? And those are the questions we have to ask. And it brings back when we look at what we say value, right? What we say is a valuable, or what we define value when it comes to smartphones. Is it going to give me the most bang for the buck? Which is why, for me, OnePlus continues to be appealing. Because when I look at Samsung, well, manufacturers-wise or hardware-wise, I love their hardware. I mean, I respect what they're doing with the Fold. I'm respecting what they're doing with their Note. I love what Samsung do when it comes to hardware innovation. I just don't like their software. I want to see more of the stock Android software. I want to get swift updates. And I'm not going to get that with Samsung because, well, for Samsung, they made it clear that's not their stick. They want to have their software experience in the way they want it, and they want to gear it around their Samsung software, their TouchWiz software, and that's how it is. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. And for the most part, a lot of people are still gravitating to Samsung because a lot more people not really, well, when you look at what stock Android brings, especially as of late on the Pixel, you can't always say, or you can't quite say it's really that much better in every sense of the matter, especially when you see some of the other phone manufacturers out there able to provide a lot of these same software experience. And just because it's not on the exact same build, for the most part, most people don't care. But when I go to Google, it reminds me of why, in a way, I'm kind of hating Google as of late. Yeah, they give me the software experience I love, but I'm hating the hardware they're giving me. And this is weird for me why OnePlus is a winner in my book, because it fit right there. I'm getting the hardware I want and the software experience I want. Maybe not quite the camera, but you know what? We found ways around that. And is there ever going to be a way we can ever get an American company to work here? And as I start looking at it and I start brainstorming, I do think that there needs to be some way we can get some help. And I say that because, well, as much as we talk about OnePlus and how well they're doing, well, let's be honest. They're doing so in a place where, competitive-wise, people have argued it's an unfair advantage. Why? Well, let's start with China's intellectual property, infringing on other companies' property. So, and I've actually talked to people about this and had a big discussion about this and how this seemed to work and why people are having problems with it. So let's kind of give you a background what goes on, at least on as far as why people are complaining, or a lot of American manufacturers are complaining about China's unfair practices and why it's costing them money. So let's start with joint ventures. So a lot of times, companies wanting to do business in China, what they'll go overseas and they'll have like a little joint venture going on where, their talent is sharing some information with them, getting them up to speed, working together. And then out of nowhere, after this little venture arrangement that seemed to be going successful, some of things that's happening. A lot of the information that's being shared are being leaked to other companies. Or they'll just out of nowhere just say, you know what, this is not working. We're done. And they'll take all of that information from what they gathered from this American company that shared this information, and they'll go build their own companies with it. So pretty much they're basically getting the talent or from American companies or these other companies, tech companies that pretty much share their talent, teaching them how to do things. And then were they thinking they're doing so in good faith and doing so in a way that benefits both? Well, the idea is not benefiting both, because if they say the joint venture is not working, they cut it off, and then they just took all the information that they learned and go use it to reverse engineer into making products and devices that they're then able to sell back to the American people at a cheaper price than what these companies have done. Yeah, it puts them in a disadvantage because, when you look at what Samsung and Apple, part of what is built into the cost of a phone is, at the end of the day, research. Coming up with these processors, the software, and all the things it takes to make your phone run smooth. Well, it takes time. It takes a lot of smart engineers putting that information together. And then when you finally get it together, you finally put all that work into years and years and years of work, and you put it together into a device that you're looking to sell. And if you share that with someone and they basically spent nothing for that information and took that to put it in their product, it costs them nothing. It costs them no labor. And yeah, they can sell it at a cheaper price. And it does make sense why people are saying that this really is an unfair advantage when it comes to a lot of the practice that's going on in China. Especially when you look at some of the counterfeit goods. I mean, you look at a lot of the things that, people have been joking about it for years. This bootleg Gucci bag that I got from China. This bootleg iPhone I got from China. When the Samsung first came out, I made fun of the fact that, man, it just looked like a Chinese knockoff of an iPhone. Because when the first Samsung Galaxy first came out, the Galaxy S1, that's basically how it looked, like a Chinese knockoff of an iPhone, except it ran Android. And, as much as I, had an issue with Apple actually having all these lawsuits suing everybody, for the first Samsung Galaxy, I actually kind of saw where Apple was coming from, because it really did look like a knockoff version of their phone. And so as you see, American companies having to deal with the labor costs of what it would take to put their products out there and build their software and Chinese company not having that same issue as far as on their side, and they able to take their products and sell it here to the States and make about as much as some of these companies would make. It makes a sense while people are saying it's not truly a level playing field. And we're asking for an American company to be able to compete with a company in another country that, when you think about it, they're not on the same field. They are not having the same standards to comply with. And really, none of us here in America are saying that we want to see American companies be, downgraded to where we're working people like over in China. We want people to have fair wages. We want there to be fair labor practices. Now, we can't force other countries to do that. No. But you do want there to be a way where if those companies are going to bring their products here, you kind of level the playing field by, slapping tariffs on it. Now, some will say, all right, look, you're missing the simple fact that when it comes to all these products and that we're dealing with smartphones and everything, chips and all this stuff, not everything is built here in America. We are getting stuff from other countries, and you look at what iPhone is built, you look at where, your average phone, your Google phones, all your phones are built. They're not built here in the States. They may be thought up as here in the States. They may be getting the software from here in the States. But all that stuff is being done overseas because they can do it at a cheaper price and then sell it to you at a price that, can make them a profit. So you're kind of being hypocritical here when you're trying to say we need to, slap tariffs on this and, and level the playing field. And that brings me back to the biggest challenge that I'm seeing with ever having an American smartphone company is that how are we ever going to be able to have a company that is going to be able to provide similar, if not better, hardware specs, hardware experience, or software experience to the competition at a price that people are going to be willing to pay for? And it looks like when we look at companies that tried in the past, they weren't able to figure that out. Motorola haven't been able to figure that out. And that goes back to the question, do we really want an American smartphone company? And when I say do we want it, I'm not talking about is it something that sounds good to say on TV, or it sounds good because, we're proud Americans, we're proud of our companies, you're about helping out your fellow man, you're about uplifting your fellow neighbor, you want to see them succeed, you want to see, us as a nation, as a country succeed, all of those things that sounds good, But at the end of the day, are we willing to open our wallets and pay for that? And the reality, I don't think so. I don't think that if we, quote, level the playing field, that will make people quite happy, As far as if leveling the playing field means that all we did was take out the cheap smartphones and we allowed these companies like Apple and Samsung to get out of control with these phones that are just costing, even more, where we found a way to get to $2,000 smartphones and those are the new norm. We're not wanting that. But at the same time, we're wanting a smartphone made by America that almost rivals that of the OnePlus, where we're seeing phones getting better and phones providing a better experience. But phones that are competing with the market and making the price of the smartphones competitive, not to the point of where it's getting out of control, but where it's starting to control some of the prices, where people are saying, I don't need to spend $2,000 for your phone when there's a phone over here that I can get for half that. And it's just as good. We want to see that here in the States. But the reality is, how are we going to be able to do that when, you got labor costs, you got a different way of doing business here in the States than we're doing overseas? And is that ever going to be possible? And for me personally, I would like to see that. I do think there's a way to do it, but I think it's going to be challenging because, if you're going to pay the wages that we want out of people, and we're going to demand that type of, quantity and quality, well, you ain't gonna be able to hire as many people as you would maybe overseas. For every maybe one American, you can probably hire 10 to 15 people in China to do the same job. And yeah, the question is, can the one American here outperform, outproduce the 15 over there? And if we can't, then that put us at a disadvantage because, we saw the issues when it comes to a brand new smartphone. You put a smartphone out there and you don't have the quantity available for people to buy it. You don't have you don't have everything you need at the end of the day. Well, you got this new phone here, or you got this demand here, but you can't meet it. And people are not going to stick around too long waiting for you to get your new phone because when it comes to smartphone technology, it is constantly evolving. It's moving fast. And if you're not ready, all it takes is 2 or 3 months before another company have figured out or came out with their product and everybody done moved on. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me here with the neXup podcast. Again, I'm your host, PC747. And I want to hear your thoughts about whether or not we as Americans can eventually see American-made smartphone and if it would ever work. Leave your comments below. Or, again, you can hit me up at PC747 at thenexup.net. I'm out.